Chapter 2 of Monsters, Part 2. Ah, Saber, welcome back. Crazy Rich turned his gaze onto Rainbow and Applejack, absent of any glimmer of recognition. And my guest from the past as well. Rainbow flicked her tail.
You don't remember our names?
Crazy let out an amiable chuckle at just the perfect pitch to curl Rainbow's lip back. You'll have to accept my apologies, my friends, but I have many names to remember, and it's been over a month since our introduction. Tell me, Saber, how's your crew? To the untrained observer, Sea Saber rarely displayed any emotions besides sternness, disappointment, and the rare glimpse of approval. But to Rainbow's more seasoned eye, she could see the sign of irritation in how one of her ears angled ever so slightly. I sent you reports. Yes, of course. Crazy's smile held firm as he sat on the horn motif chair that Applejack had been using before the hoof wrestle. Aura would summarize them for me from time to time. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to read your latest letter just yet, so perhaps you could fill me in. He paused, glancing around. Is Miss Sparkle here? I've been expecting to speak to her.
Well, too bad!
Rainbow snapped, drawing a startled gasp from the Earth Stallion. She glanced towards Applejack, expecting chastisement, but her friend only gave a curt nod.
Twilight's gone, and that's why we're here.
Gone? Crazy repeated. He looked to Saber with detached curiosity. What happened? We're not clear on the nature of the incident, Saber droned. Current theory is an advanced case of depth corruption. She paused, as if weighing her words. We suspect that she may have transformed into a newborn weird. Hold up, Applejack said. What in tarnation is a weird? It's sort of a catch-all term, Saber explained. Divers use it to describe the type of magically potent, violent creatures that dominate everything under the water's surface. I've never heard of a pony becoming one, outside of sailor gossip. But, well, Twilight is an extremely powerful unicorn, and far from normal. Rainbow stomped a hoof, but the thick rug somewhat dampened the impact. She tried to make up for it with her voice.
She's not a monster! She just needs our help!
Crazy looked between the three mares in turn before turning back to Sea Saber, who gave a curt shake of her head. We have reason to suspect that Twilight fled back to Old Canterlot. Her friends want to pursue, but I respectfully advise against sending my team back to a site we barely escaped from with our lives previously. Rainbow glared daggers at the side of Saber's head. She stomped up to her mentor, fur bristling, speaking in a barely restrained hiss through clenched teeth.
Whose side are you on?
Saber kept her eyes on her employer. My team's side. Always.
You... How...
Rainbow's attempts at speech devolved into a low growl. Her whole body began to shake. Her jaw clenched so hard that it hurt. How could Saber be so calm? How could she talk about Twilight that way without even blinking an eye? There were times where Rainbow had admired her stoicism, but at that moment she wanted nothing more than to tackle the other Pegasus and pummel her until she was forced to display an equine emotion. A hoof tugged on her shoulder, but Rainbow smacked it aside. Applejack's soft voice whispered into her ear. I know y'all are upset, Sugar Cube, and I am too, but we ain't gonna catch any flies with vinegar. Rainbow rounded on her with a fresh surge of anger.
Would you quit it with the stupid countryisms?
She hissed.
Twilight's out there and she needs us, and I don't have anything but vinegar right now, and... you've got me using them now too. Crazy Rich, to his credit, at least seemed to have the decency to look anxious when he spoke. I'm sorry, friends, but if Saber says that it's too dangerous, then I have to take her advice into consideration. Maybe we could meet again after I've had some time and— No! Rainbow was in front of Crazy so fast that the stallion tripped over his robes and fell onto his flank with a cry of shock. She jabbed a hoof into his chest. Hard.
No rescheduling. You decide right now. I'm not waiting another second.
Rainbow Dash! Rainbow kept her gaze fixed on Crazy's as Applejack pulled her back. Beating on him ain't gonna change his mind.
It will if I beat hard enough.
Rainbow's wings pumped against her sides as she struggled to escape the farm pony's iron grip. Crazy Rich scrambled backwards, voice shaking.
I'm sorry, but I have to go. Saber, I'll have Aura schedule another—
Luna!
Rainbow shouted, cutting him off.
We have Princess Luna!
Crazy paused halfway to the door. Seconds passed in silence before he tore his frightened gaze from Rainbow's and looked to Saber.
You found an alicorn?
There was the ear twitch again.
It's in my reports.
Rainbow just barely held back a scream of frustration, drawing Crazy's attention back.
Talk to me, not her.
Crazy's eyes darted between the two Pegasi, one the very image of stoicism, and the other still fighting to escape Applejack's hold. Tentatively, he picked himself up off the ground.
Well, that's, fantastic.
He licked his lips, speaking with obvious care as he took slow steps backwards.
I would certainly love to speak with her.
Rainbow Dash could see the path before her now. Her desperate anger dimmed, giving way to intense focus.
Let go, AJ. I've got this.
Y'all ain't gonna go crazy again? Applejack didn't bother to hide her skepticism.
No. I'm good. Thanks.
Don't make me regret this, you hear? Slowly, Applejack relinquished her grip. Rainbow advanced on Crazy, keeping her pace at a measured walk. He seemed to have trouble holding eye contact with her.
Do you remember Fluttershy, Crazy?
She asked. His mouth stammered open, but no words came out, so Rainbow kept going.
She's the other Pegasus, remember? She was in a magical coma when we arrived, and Twilight found a way to wake her up.
Crazy's back bumped up against the door. To his credit, he didn't reach for the handle.
I remember.
Luna's in the same kind of coma,
Rainbow said, almost coming close enough to bump muzzles before stopping. It wasn't exactly a lie, as Rainbow figured that magic comas must all be more or less the same. She was aware of her lack of magical know-how. Either way, she would have told any lie she needed to, if it would help her save Twilight.
Twilight's the only one that can wake her up. Get it?
Ah, yes.
Crazy stole a glance towards Sea Saber.
I see.
Rainbow stepped in the way, angling her head to keep her one eye in front of his.
Don't you want to be the pony who introduces a living Princess Luna back to the world, Crazy?
The conflict in his eyes was obvious so close up. He flicked his gaze past her to Sea Saber, then back, and then between them several more times.
Okay,
he said.
Do it, Saber. Find Twilight and bring back Luna.
Rainbow let out a breath that she hadn't realized she was holding, as a cold wave of relief washed over her. She stepped back, folding her flared wings back against her sides, and gave Crazy a little smile.
Thank you.
Sea Saber's voice came in from behind her.
Respectfully, sir, that's an extremely dangerous assignment. I'm not comfortable sending my team in there as we are now.
Now that Rainbow had vacated his personal space, Crazy's confidence seemed to be coming back to him. He straightened out his robes with a hoof and put on a smile that sat somewhere between excitement and apprehension.
I understand, Saber. I'll be sure to raise your budget accordingly, of course.
He knocked a hind hoof against the door behind him, and it opened to reveal a trio of servants waiting with bright smiles.
I trust you'll do what you need to do. Just make sure to let me know ahead of your return so I can make proper preparations to welcome a living princess.
He dipped his head to Rainbow Dash and Applejack in turn, all signs of nervousness having been replaced by his usual energy.
Good luck, all.
He stepped out of the room, and one of the servants shut the door behind him. Sea Saber let out a small grunt. Rainbow turned around, meeting Saber's stern gaze with one that she hoped was equally hard.
I'm sorry, Saber, but I can't just leave my friend hanging.
Saber's wings twitched. She was already walking for the door.
We're doubling your training. Usual time in the yard.
She didn't wait for a response before marching out into the hall and closing the door behind her. Rainbow heaved a deep sigh and looked to Applejack with a meek smile.
Did I go too far?
Tarnation, Rainbow, Applejack said. Y'all got some hellfire in you.
Yeah.
Rainbow turned to the door, grimacing as she listened to Sea Saber's measured hoofsteps fade away.
And I think Saber might be planning on showing me hers. Once again,
the other said.
I must admit an appreciation for the sheer tenacity of your foolishness. Shut up,
Twilight hissed. She kept her eyes fixed on the mushroom patties, checking them, the old pan cradling it, and the fire underneath once again.
It's almost done.
The kitchen of Kennerlock Castle's west wing was completely sealed off by rubble. Twilight knew this because she had checked it herself, with all the usual thoroughness she prided herself on, and so she had decided that it would be safe to cook with a real fire. The stoves were broken, of course, but most of the cooking utensils had survived, thanks to preservative spells placed on them centuries ago. It was cozy, almost, with the warm light of the fire and the heat trapped by the surrounding stone. If not for the others' steady mockery and the growing sense of desperation, Twilight might have even been able to relax. But she couldn't do that. Dozens of cooking books were arranged around the kitchen, fetched on expeditions to the archives, then organized by author, style, and scope, but that had been at least 2 wakings ago. The order had since given way to chaos, as Twilight had systematically worked through each book, trying the advice contained within before discarding it as worthless. The bright colors and friendly pictures of Philly's first fried foods now sat side by side with the strict, tiny font mythology of Advanced Cooking Theory 9th edition. And so it was for countless others. No matter how hard Twilight looked, she couldn't find a good cookbook. Every instruction set led to that same ashen taste and the same scorn from the sinister voice in her head, and she was beginning to wonder if she had gone mad. Surely the castle would have at least one text on cooking with usable knowledge. But no, they didn't. Twilight knew this because if it did, then she would be able to make a mushroom patty taste like food. She was running out of options. Before her now was the last book she had taken from the archive, which she had grabbed only in a bid to appease the other. The Carnivore's Cookbook, Equestrian Edition, by Gustave Legrand. It included vegetarian recipes designed to satisfy a carnivore's taste, as well as some traditional Griffin dishes for the more adventurous pony. Twilight didn't consider herself adventurous, and so she had skipped past those. She didn't eat meat, after all.
And yet here we are, working from a tome written to satisfy carnivores. It's probably just as bad as all the others,
Twilight muttered. Was it time yet? She had cast a spell to alert her when the proper time had passed, but maybe she had missed it.
There's no reason to expect this book to be any better than the rest.
The others stepped into sight on the other side of the cooking fire. The light cast long shadows over its face.
Your books aren't the problem, little flower. No, they have to be the problem,
Twilight insisted.
I don't know what else it could be.
The alarm spell went off, and Twilight levitated the pan off the fire, sliding the mushrooms onto a ceramic plate decorated with suns and moons. She took a deep breath to draw in the scent. Her mouth didn't water as she had hoped. Her ivory fork and sapphire-encrusted knife shook in the grip of her levitation as she cut a bite-sized piece free. She lifted the fork to her open mouth, but couldn't bring herself to bite. Perhaps it would be better to just go find more books. She didn't eat meat. Monsters ate meat. Why was she even trying this? The other took control, levitating the fork fully into her mouth. She bit down almost without thinking, wincing at the bitter, familiar taste. Red tears welled in her eyes even before she swallowed. The pan fell to the ground with a clatter loud enough to make her wince.
I don't understand. I've tried every spice in the castle and it all tastes the same. What am I doing wrong? You know what's wrong.
The other leered down at her with an imperious frown.
It's just a matter of acceptance. No. No.
Twilight fell onto her side.
It can't be right, can it?
She felt so weak.
It's not. I can't. Not again. Do you want to die? Is that what it is?
The other shook its head and snorted.
No. I know that you wish to live, despite your many attempts to foil our continued survival. So why will you not do what is required to sustain us? You're wrong,
Twilight whispered. And this time she wasn't even so sure if she believed it.
There's another way.
The other's lip curled back, revealing bloody fangs underneath that glistened in the flickering firelight.
No, there very much isn't. Have you already forgotten our arrival in these wretched ruins? It was meat that saved us then, and it is meat that will save us now. I still regret that moment.
Twilight pulled her hooves tight around herself as she shivered.
It was a mistake. The mushrooms here are edible. Yes, we know that now, but ultimately it doesn't matter.
A sinister smile graced the other's face.
The transformation would have happened eventually, little flower. It was always just a matter of time.
Twilight rolled onto her back, shaking her head at the ceiling.
No. I should have held you back. And I'm not letting you trick me again. I don't need meat. I won't let you turn me into a monster. What does it mean to be a monster?
Twilight frowned. She looked to the other, who had taken up a position directly on top of the cooking fire. The glowing embers framed its face in a soft orange.
A monster is a villain. A bad pony.
The other laughed.
Defining one word with another. We know better than that.
Twilight flicked her tail, but she knew it was right. She rolled onto her belly and looked down at her hooves, deep in thought.
Let me help you.
The other leaned in close, whispering directly into her ear.
Are all griffins monsters?
Twilight's brow furrowed.
Gava is a monster. Not what I asked.
The other had moved to her other ear. It spoke slowly, deliberately.
We've met griffins besides her. Were they monsters?
Twilight's eyes widened as she turned to face her doppelganger's grinning face. Its smile somehow grew even wider.
Your memories are my own, yes. It's hazy, but I remember another griffin, long before. What was her name? Gilda? Haughty and bullish, perhaps. But was she a monster?
Twilight bit her lip.
No. And did Gilda eat meat?
With a sigh.
Like all griffins, yes.
The other hummed with exaggerated thoughtfulness as it sat down in front of her.
Gilda the Griffin ate meat and she was not a monster. So we know that eating meat isn't what makes a monster, don't we? It's different,
Twilight insisted, looking away.
I'm a pony.
The other didn't care where she looked. It remained in the center of her vision, even visible when she blinked, as it curled its lip back.
We are no mere pony. You're wrong,
Twilight hissed, and a violent shiver racked her body.
I'm a pony. The normal pony doesn't have sharp teeth, nor does it cry blood.
Red tears began to run down the other's cheeks as it opened its mouth to display its fangs.
They are fragile creatures and prone to breaking. We are a thing beyond them. Greater than them, though not yet by very far. I'm a pony,
Twilight repeated.
If I'm not a pony, then I'm a monster.
She sucked in a shaky breath and forced her words out through clenched teeth.
And I'm not a monster. Do you really think it's so simple? You are blossoming into something more, my delicate little flower,
the other whispered.
We are no more a monster than the griffin who hunts for survival. Won't you embrace it with me? Let us soar to new heights, and together we can recreate Equestria as it is meant to be. We can make it right again.
The other's voice turned cold.
Or you can reject us. We will starve down here as you stuff us with foraged plant matter, cooked to perfection, and Equestria will truly be lost. All due to your dull insistence on eating only one specific kind of dead thing. Unfortunately, the choice is all yours.
Twilight just shook her head. She squeezed her eyes shut, falling onto her side and curling up into a ball. Her heart pounded in her ears like a giant drum, drowning out her thoughts, and her voice began to crack between whimpering sobs.
I don't want to. Why won't you just let me be a pony? Hush now, little one,
the other cooed. Twilight stiffened, going quiet with a shuddering gasp, as she felt the chill of its body wrapping around her and the cold tickle of its breath against her ear.
We will always be a pony, my dear Blossom. But a pony greater than any before us. Evolution is a thing to be celebrated, is it not?
Seconds passed in agonizing silence. Gradually, Twilight's heart began to slow down. She opened her eyes as the quiet cackling of the fire droned in the background. She was a pony. She would always be a pony. Thestrals ate meat and had fangs, but they were still ponies, weren't they? And yet...
I don't want to be special. It is not a choice. You are special, and you always have been. Do you think your dear princess chose you without thought? No.
For the first time in recent memory, Twilight was able to say something without doubt. The other cocked its head.
Well, then why?
That question hung in the air for a long, heavy moment. Twilight opened her mouth to speak several times, only to close it without a sound. Why had the princess chosen her? As a filly, she had assumed that she had been picked for her magical ability, but that idea seemed so naive as she got older. Magical prodigies were born once every few generations, and Celestia had never taken any of them on as personal students. And so as Twilight got older, she had decided that the princess must have had some purpose for her, some unseen plan, and that it would all be explained to her once the time had finally come. When she had met her friends and rediscovered the elements of harmony, she felt as if that purpose had become clear. But what if that wasn't it? What if, when the time had come, Twilight wasn't there to fulfill it? Twilight licked her dry lips. She climbed up to a sitting position, holding her legs close.
I need some time to think.
The other, unseen, answered with an amused hum.
Take all the time you need.
Twilight could feel its presence recede into the back of her mind. It was watching as it always did, yes, but from a distance. For a moment, she simply sat there, suspecting some ploy, but it seemed the other was truly giving her some space to think. She had been granted a sense of privacy that she had been beginning to think she would never experience again. With a heavy sigh, Twilight stared into the smoldering fire and let her mind drift. She thought of her home, of Aloysius floating in a waterlogged library, surrounded by tattered books, blood, and the mangled corpses of the ponies he had killed. She thought of her parents, and her brother, and her neighbors, and her old friends from Canterlot. She remembered Lily Quick's journal and the dead mare's account of the ponies being swept away by waves strong enough to demolish buildings. Ever since she first woke up in the nightmare ruins of Canterlot, every day seemed to bring with it a new loss or knowledge of an old one that she hadn't even been aware of. Would she ever be able to bury her parents? Would she even recognize them if she found the bodies? Or would she just gingerly snip past as she had with every other skeleton she had seen in the past 3 weeks? Had they wondered the same thing about her when they were still alive? Or had they held out some hope that she would somehow save them all? She shook her head, dislodging the distracting thoughts. Guilt was always lingering in the back of her mind, and she could contemplate it at any time. Right now, she needed to confront the question that had haunted her ever since she tore a chunk of dry meat off the corpse of a changeling with her bare teeth. The memory made bile rise in the back of her throat, even as her mouth watered. Was she a monster? The crackle of the fire brought her back to old lessons received in the very same castle, back when it was warm and bright and full of life. She remembered when a delegation of griffins had arrived for dinner, and Princess Celestia had had her cooks arrange a feast of meats in their honor. Chicken, duck, fish, and pig. Twilight had cried when she saw all the bodies splayed across the massive dining table, dressed in fragrant spices, but the princess had been quick to take her aside and calm her down.
There's no need to be afraid of carnivores, Twilight,
the princess had said, wearing the same kind smile she always did when it was just the two of them, away from all the courtiers, bureaucrats, and reporters.
Every life ends one day, and they help the bodies return to nature once the spirit moves on. But what if the animals don't want to die?
Twilight had asked.
Doesn't it hurt them? What if they want to eat me? Oh, my dear little pony.
Celestia had pulled her into a tight hug to quiet her sobs.
Every animal on that table died naturally after long, happy lives. Carnivores aren't monsters. They're just another beautiful part of the harmony of our world.
And so, Twilight had dried her tears, straightened out her dress, with some help from the princess, and returned to dinner. She still couldn't bring herself to look at the griffins eating, but she didn't cry, and she didn't have any nightmares afterwards of being hunted by hungry diplomats. As she grew older, she had grown more comfortable with the concept of carnivore diets until, eventually, she could exchange formalities with visiting griffins over dinner without a second thought. Because carnivores weren't monsters, they were just another part. But could Twilight bring herself to join them? Changelings howled in the distance, their shrieks muffled by the heavy stones of the castle, and she couldn't help but shiver at the sound. She was a unicorn, and even if carnivores were natural, she didn't eat meat. It simply wasn't done. Then again, the changeling she had scavenged hadn't suffered anymore because of her. The sound of death had become a regular occurrence in the wake of Canterlot's passing. And hadn't she always taken a certain pride in discarding old ideas when new information came to light? A new memory came to her, of a conversation over tea in the once verdant gardens that surrounded the castle. Celestia had been sending Twilight on some errand, and Twilight had been anxious, as always, about the prospect of failure. She didn't remember what the task had been anymore, but she did remember her mentor's kind smile and the soft words she had spoken.
"You have never failed me, Twilight,"
she said as she lowered her cup back to the table.
"That's why you are my most faithful student."
Twilight blinked. There was no wind in the ruins of Canterlot, and so her world was deathly silent. The embers of what was once her cooking fire were beginning to dim. How long had she been lost in thought? Celestia's voice echoed in her head.
"My most faithful student."
Twilight had failed her mentor one too many times already. Would she really doom herself, doom Equestria over her own stubborn ideals?
"Just because I need meat doesn't mean I'm not a pony anymore. As long as I don't hurt anyone, I'm not a monster."
The other was right, as much as she hated it. Formative years spent carefully training rational thought had cursed her with a scholar's mind. And so, with one theory discarded, she brought up a new one. She was not a monster. She was a pony who ate meat. If she didn't obtain it, then the last hopes of Equestria would die with her, trapped within this ancient crypt. She made her choice. Her stomach growled, yet she felt as if one of several great weights had been lifted from her withers. She looked up with tentative relief and met eyes with the other, watching silently from across the room.
"You're right,"
she breathed.
"I need meat."
The other smiled, revealing bloody fangs.